Lesson 46. Questions and Answers. Does this nurse always take care of the baby? Yes, this nurse always takes care of the baby. Does this nurse always take care of the baby? No, this nurse does not always take care of the baby. Does a good teacher always understand his pupils? Yes, a good teacher always understands his pupils. Does a good teacher always understand his pupils? No, a good teacher does not always understand his pupils. Do old men always tell old stories? Yes, old men always tell old stories. Do old men always tell old stories? No, old men do not always tell old stories. Do the students sometimes walk to school? Yes, the students sometimes walk to school. Do the students sometimes walk to school? No, the students do not sometimes walk to school. Does the weather sometimes become very cold? Yes, the weather sometimes becomes very cold. Does the weather sometimes become very cold? No, the weather does not sometimes become very cold. Does she sometimes teach geography? Yes, she sometimes teaches geography. Does she sometimes teach geography? No, she does not sometimes teach geography. Page 323. Do those naughty boys often disobey their parents? Yes, those naughty boys often disobey their parents. Do those naughty boys often disobey their parents? No, those naughty boys do not often disobey their parents. Do gardeners often prepare the ground for planting? Yes, gardeners often prepare the ground for planting. Do gardeners often prepare the ground for planting? No, gardeners do not often prepare the ground for planting. Does your family often spend the summer at the seaside? Yes, my family often spends the summer at the seaside. Does your family often spend the summer at the seaside? No, my family does not often spend the summer at the seaside. Does he usually swim in the river alone? Yes, he usually swims in the river alone. Does he usually swim in the river alone? No, he does not usually swim in the river alone. Do artists usually work in their studios? Yes, artists usually work in their studios. Do artists usually work in their studios? No, artists do not usually work in their studios. Do the typists usually type letters in this office? Yes, the typists usually type letters in this office. Do the typists usually type letters in this office? No, the typists do not usually type letters in this office. Do buffaloes always pull plows for farmers? Yes, buffaloes always pull plows for farmers. Do buffaloes always pull plows for farmers? No, buffaloes do not always pull plows for farmers. Does this clock strike every half an hour? Yes, this clock strikes every half an hour. Does this clock strike every half an hour? No, this clock does not strike every half an hour. Does this policeman always blow his whistle? Yes, this policeman always blows his whistle. Does this policeman always blow his whistle? No, this policeman does not always blow his whistle. Page 324. Does he sometimes laugh at his poor friend? Yes, he sometimes laughs at his poor friend. Does he sometimes laugh at his poor friend? No, he does not sometimes laugh at his poor friend. Does the last train always leave at 10 o'clock? Yes, the last train always leaves at 10 o'clock. Does the last train always leave at 10 o'clock? No, the last train does not always leave at 10 o'clock. Does the chief clerk often arrive at the office very early? Yes, the chief clerk often arrives at the office very early. Does the chief clerk often arrive at the office very early? No, the chief clerk does not often arrive at the office very early. Do scientists always speak of scientific subjects? Yes, scientists always speak of scientific subjects. Do scientists always speak of scientific subjects? No, scientists do not always speak of scientific subjects. Do the Scouts sometimes help the traffic police? Yes, the Scouts sometimes help the traffic police. Do the Scouts sometimes help the traffic police? No, the Scouts do not sometimes help the traffic police. Do workers often demand an increase in wages? Yes, workers often demand an increase in wages. Do workers often demand an increase in wages? No, workers do not often demand an increase in wages. Does she often introduce you to her friends? Yes, she often introduces me to her friends. Does she often introduce you to her friends? No, she does not often introduce me to her friends. Does the employee always praise his employer? Yes, the employee always praises his employer. Does the employee always praise his employer? No, the employee does not always praise his employer. Page 325. Does the manager often leave the office after 6 o'clock? Yes, the manager often leaves the office after 6 o'clock. Does the manager often leave the office after 6 o'clock? No, the manager does not often leave the office after 6 o'clock. Do students sit for their examination every year? Yes, students sit for their examination every year. Do students sit for their examination every year? No, students do not sit for their examination every year. Does his secretary always work well? Yes, his secretary always works well. Does his secretary always work well? No, his secretary does not always work well. Does that ambulance often pass your house? Yes, that ambulance often passes my house. Does that ambulance often pass your house? No, that ambulance does not often pass my house. Does he always plant maize and cassava? Yes, he always plants maize and cassava. Does he always plant maize and cassava? No, he does not always plant maize and cassava. Does your father sometimes smoke a pipe? Yes, my father sometimes smokes a pipe. Does your father sometimes smoke a pipe? No, my father never smokes a pipe. Does your sister sometimes write with a ballpoint pen? Yes, my sister sometimes writes with a ballpoint pen. Does your sister sometimes write with a ballpoint pen? No, my sister never writes with a ballpoint pen. Do the soldiers always practice shooting? Yes, the soldiers always practice shooting. Do the soldiers always practice shooting? No, the soldiers do not always practice shooting. Page 326. Do merchants often bring their goods in trucks? Yes, merchants often bring their goods in trucks. Do merchants often bring their goods in trucks? No, merchants do not often bring their goods in trucks. Does your mother sometimes teach at a local primary school? Yes, my mother sometimes teaches at a local primary school. Does your mother sometimes teach at a local primary school? No, my mother never teaches at a local primary school. Do they often climb that steep hill? Yes, they often climb that steep hill. Do they often climb that steep hill? No, they do not often climb that steep hill. Do the soldiers polish their boots every week? Yes, the soldiers polish their boots every week. Do the soldiers polish their boots every week? No, the soldiers do not polish their boots every week. Does the baby always play with its toys? Yes, the baby always plays with its toys. Does the baby always play with its toys? No, the baby does not always play with its toys. Does she always think of buying a new car? Yes, she always thinks of buying a new car. Does she always think of buying a new car? No, she does not always think of buying a new car. Does this doctor always treat his patients nicely? Yes, this doctor always treats his patients nicely. Does this doctor always treat his patients nicely? No, this doctor does not always treat his patients nicely? Does the doctor always arrive at his clinic on time? Yes, the doctor always arrives at his clinic on time. Does the doctor always arrive at his clinic on time? No, the doctor does not always arrive at his clinic on time. Page 327. Does he sometimes wear a valuable watch? Yes, he sometimes wears a valuable watch. Does he sometimes wear a valuable watch? No, he never wears a valuable watch.